My name is the first one, but I'm not the only one who work on the report and who work on the presentation. I got two my colleagues here, Viola Horska and Mirek Kadlec, who did really good job on preparing the country report, and their job is not finished yet because we have to finalize it, and then we will somehow will be talking about it on the national level to our stakeholders. So I'm going to talk about the non-formal qualification in the Czech Republic and how is the situation here. And in Czech Republic, situation is like completely different than other countries, because one thing that we don't have one national qualification framework. And the name of the project is about how to implement non-formal qualifications into the national qualification framework, and we don't have one. So what we can do with this? But we have some systems, and you can see when we reference our educational systems in 2011 to EQF, to European Qualification Framework, we work with those school system, including higher education, and we work with NSK, as we call it in Czech, NSK, Národní soustava kvalifikací, which is in English, National Register of Qualification. And now I will be talking about this system, National Register of Qualification. This is how we referenced our systems to the EQF. You see the school systems, and on the right you see the NSK level. We have 8 levels, because we don't have one system, but in the system of validation, NSK level, we have 8 levels. Is the same for the formal qualification. So we are using more or less EQF descriptors for those systems. What is it, NSK? It's the system for validation and recognition, non-formal and informal learning. That's why it was introduced. Is it public register of all those qualifications within the system of validation? And we have legislation for it, and it's Act on Verification and Recognition of Further Education Results, but we call it Validation Act. It's about this, and in this Act you will hear everything what's going on in the system and how you can enter with your qualifications, how to assess everything about the competencies and so on. And when we started it, it was like for us significant, like really important support for lifelong learning. And as I said, it has 8 qualification level descriptors. So this NSK system has its own descriptors. So it's a national system. It's about the history of NSK. You know, during the dark times of communist dictatorship in the Czechoslovakia for 40 years, we didn't really thought about adult education or further education or qualification outside the schools. We were more focused on the formal education than the schools. And during the 90s, after the Velvet Revolution, we had like different problems because we were separating, we were divorcing Slovakia, and we didn't know what to do in the democratic world. So we haven't really been thinking about the qualification frameworks or validation of non-formal and informal learning. So we started a little bit later than other democratic countries, I think. And I started with 2004, that discussion started, but the discussion started around 2000 because there were also some OECD analysis that it's necessary to do something with the validation system on the national levels. So in 2004 there were like really important talks whether to have some kind of legislation which is focused on adult education, or something which is outside of the school system. So we were thinking about the adult education, as they call it in Czech Republic, it's a further education, legislation. But after that we slightly reduce it to the validation system only. And thanks to the ESF money, we started with one big project which was called NSK, Development of the National Register of Qualification, to support link between initial and further education. And we started to build this register with the qualifications outside the formal system, which was based on the needs of the labor market. And in 2006, to help this project, there was a law the legislation approved by the government on verification and recognition of further education results. There wasn't just one project. This one was on qualification. The other project was on occupation, because you have to start with the defining occupation and then defining the qualifications. But we were a little bit, you know, like it was vice versa. To start here, we started with the qualifications, but then the occupations went really fast, and they created and defined the competencies for the occupation, and then we created more or less the qualifications based on those occupations. So the systemic project, National System of Occupations, which is called NSP, started in 2007 and continued 2008. In 2009, there was another important legislation which was linked to retraining programs. Because retraining programs in the Czech Republic, it's a kind of big thing, because it's financed by the government for the people registered on the labor offices searching for jobs. So those retraining programs were put in the legislation, and all the things about the accreditation of education institution was set in this law. And we have another project, NSK2. It was like another development and implementation of National Register of Qualification, which lasted to 2015. And more than 1,000 qualifications have been defined within the system during this period. And we had to update the legislation. So in 2012, there was like an update of our, as we call it previously, Adult Education Act, but it's more Validation Act. And now we have this version from 2012. Who's responsible for the concept of validation and recognition of formal and informal learnings in the Czech Republic? It's the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport, who run the legislation, the law, and it's also the National Institute for Education, because National Institute for Education, where I work, it's a kind of agency for the Ministry of Education, where we do the things the ministry needs to be done. And all the process and the responsibilities of everything and all the institutions involved in the process of validation is described in this Act number 179. Within this system, we defined qualification and assessment standards for all the qualifications, and those were done by the sector councils. Sector councils, there are 29 of them, depending on the sector. You can hear it. We have one on agriculture, we have one on culture, we have one on, I don't know, engineering, electric engineering, and so on. And those qualification and assessment standards were, well, the last thing is it's approved by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports. And the sector councils, which are usually the people from the labor market, representatives of the employers mainly, but also the employees, they have to be proactive in creating those registers. So they are coming up with the new proposals for new qualifications and so on. So it's not coming from the policymakers usually, but it's coming from the labor market, where it's really like necessary. And those sector councils, as I said, are usually employers mainly, but also employees. And there are also the relevant ministries involved in those sector councils. And in every sector council is involved one of my colleagues from our institute, from National Institute of Education. And what are those standards, qualification standard and assessment standard? You can hear it by the name, but you can read it here. What is qualification standard? It's the list of the skills required for the specific job, for a specific profession. And assessment standard, in Czech it's a hodnotící standard, it's a list of criteria you need to show when you want to be examined. Another important step in this process of validation: who's giving the license to authorized person an institution? Who are those authorized persons and authorized bodies? We see that authorized bodies are the ministries which are given, those qualifications are given. It could be the Ministry of Regional Development, Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Transport. So those are authorizing bodies who authorize person who can examine the applicant for this qualification. So authorization is linked to specific vocational qualification and is valid for 5 years, and later on it could be prolonged. And again, the process is described in the Act on validation. Who is the authorizing body? I already was talking about it. It's a central administrative authority competent to decide in granting renewal or withdrawal of authorization based on the fact that the mandate is set out in annex to the Act. Authorized person could be anyone. Almost. I know it's very simplified to say it's anyone. Usually it's educational institution, could be the company, could be the one person, craftsman or someone who's working in this kind of field that we are talking about. How is it with the assessment of learning outcomes that are based on the standards? Authorized persons, it can be schools, the institutions are set, and this assessment is done by them. Some standards require to have more than one person, and they require to have a jury there. So it could be 2 or 3 persons, but depends on the qualifications. Every qualifications has a different description and different needs. And the recognition, because first we have assessment, then we have recognition. If you are assessed, then you have given a certificate. And it's delivered by the authorized person or the jury who examine or assess the applicant. We have those qualifications, I didn't say at the beginning, we have qualifications that we formally call them partial qualifications, and those, they were called full qualifications. And then we changed it because we didn't like the partial and full, so we changed it to professional qualification and complete professional qualifications. And some qualifications, vocational qualifications, if you have them like more, they give you those complete qualifications. And those complete qualifications could be the bricklayer or something like this, or a photographer, but those partial, formally partial, but now what we call vocational qualification, could be photographer for landscape, photographer portraits, or something like this. And if you want to have the full qualification or complete qualification, you need to have all those photograph qualifications. And when you have them, you can go to the school to be assessed there, and you can be given the formal education certificate. But not all the qualification, not all the vocational qualification within the system has its own complete vocational qualification. So some of them you might never get those award or certificate from the formal education. This is the picture that we like to show, that the system of validation, it's linked to initial education and further education or adult education, and this is that. It starts with the requirements of the labor market, then it's about the education, and then it's about the awards and assessment. So this is the picture that we started to show at the beginning when we started the project NSK, and we are still showing it because we like the colors and so on. So you can see it now as well. And I didn't say that at the beginning. We have those qualifications in the register. They are in Czech, but all of them are also in English. So all the standards you can find in Czech and also in English. So this is our website, národní-kvalifikace.cz, and it's about the National Register of Qualification. You can find all the qualifications, you can find all the authorized persons there, you can find everything you need to know about the NSK system. So check it out. I think it might be really, really interesting. There are all the questions, what is it, NSK, how it started, who do the assessment, and so on and so on. All the information about NSK you will find on these pages. how are qualifications included into the system? I was already talking about it, but it's, I try to simplify here in 4 points what we do with the qualifications. The first, the new qualification must be proposed. Usually it's proposed by the sector council, might be proposed by the individual, but it has to be the proposal at the beginning. Then that the proposal of the qualification is evaluated by the National Institute, is evaluated by the sector council, and then if it's included, it's in the production plan. This production plan, it's the annual production plan, which is given to the Ministry of Education, and it says that those qualifications need to be developed in the next year. So usually this is like really simple what's going on, because there is lots of work on defining the qualifications and so on. And this is like step by step. Design of the proposal, we call it birth certificate. That's birth certificate, rodný list. There are just some simple information about the qualification and why it's necessary to have this qualification, and why explanation that this is missing on the labor market and we need to do it. Then there is, it's coming the evaluation of the proposal by the sector councils, by the Ministry of Education, and by the authorizing bodies, which could be the other ministries responsible for those qualifications. And then, if it's not rejected, it's included in the annual production plan or revision plan, because we want to revise all the qualifications that we have in the system. Then, if it's in a production plan, we have to establish for every qualification, almost for every qualification, specific working group of the experts who will create this qualification. Those experts are usually, could be the people who introduce this proposal of the qualification, but there are the people from the sector councils, there are the people from the National Institute of Education, because we are responsible even for the formal education. So that's why there is necessary to have this link to the initial education as well. Then it's drafting a qualification and a qualification standard and also assessment standard. So it's done, and then it's sent to independent experts who will send the comments or evaluate these qualification and those standards. And then, if it's okay, then it's sent to the sector councils. And if it's approved by the sector council is sending this qualification to the authorized bodies, which is responsible ministries, and then to Ministry of Education. So it's a quite a long process. It's not like in 1 week time or 1 month even. It usually takes one year, maybe sometimes even longer. And then, if it's approved by the Ministry of Education, we usually have sets, like every year in the Ministry of Education, there are like 3 sets of qualifications that are approved by the minister, and then it's included and published in the NSK information system, which is our website. And then authorization can start. Institutions or the people can ask for the authorization, and if we have some authorized persons or institutions, then we can start with the testing and awarding. Here you can see the total number of the qualifications within the system, in NSK system. We started here with 2010 because the first project, NSK project, there were only a few qualifications because it was kind of a pilot. But after that, you can see that we started in 2010 with 200 qualifications, and now, 6.5 years later, we have almost 1,200 qualifications described in the system. Thanks to the project, I have to say, because there was quite a lot of money on this work. And this is the total number of awards in the system. So, 2010, just a few hundreds, a few tens or few hundreds, and now you can see it's more than 160. It's I think 170, 1,700, 170 1,000 qualifications. Sorry. Sorry for my English. But it's quite a lot. You can see, you can read the numbers. I think it's easier than to understand me or listen to me. So now we have those awards, which is quite a lot. But I have to say that our qualifications are regulated professions. So they are quite important for us, for the system. It says that, like a security guard, it's in the legislation that if you want to become a security guard, you have to go through the system. So we have lots of security guards, and it's a big number of those awards. So one thing is that we started some 12 years ago with the system, but still it's a new system, and we have to develop it, and we have to promote it more and more, because not all the people, not all the companies, not all the employers know about the system, but it's getting better and better. Here are the exact figures that 1,194 qualifications are already in the system. We have 1,400 authorized persons, those people who can assess the participants, applicants, and more than 171,000, now it's correct, awards within the system. And how is it with the financing? It was expensive to create a system and use ESF projects for that. It was NSK1, NSK2. And within the project, most of the qualifications were created. But the project ended at 2015, and now we have to find another funding, another money, how to sustain the system, how to sustain the system. And it's not that easy, because there were lots of projects, lots of system was established, and now it has to be implemented. And I think that all the Eastern European countries know what I'm talking about, because now we are looking for lots of money from the state budget to co-finance those projects that we started during the ESF era. So it's not that easy, but I think that we were kind of successful in the NSK, with NSK system, because we have some agreement with the with the Ministry of Education about creating every year like 30 new qualifications, and to have money on this making of new qualifications, and then renewing or updating those qualifications that are already in the system. But we don't want the system to be dead soon, so we want them to refresh it like every year, and to be like really something for the field of education and the labor market. But if you want to include your qualification with the proposal, you don't need to pay for it. If you want to submit your proposal of the qualification, you can fill it online, or you can go to the sector council and tell them that you would like to see the new qualifications within the system. So there is no special fee for this. But after that, we have to pay for those expert groups and for the sector councils for their work on creating the system. So this is the funding or financing the system at the moment. And I have to say that employers contribute from their budget by a third of the cost at the moment. And future. I was talking about it. We have to update the system. It's necessary to quality assure the system, because lots of the qualifications are completely new, and we didn't assess them if they are okay, so we have to renew them. It will be expensive again, and we have to do it. And we know that labor market, they still need new qualifications, so we have to create, because it doesn't say that if we have 1,200 qualification, it's all done, but there will be time to create a new qualification. And funding, it's always funding, financing the system, or financing something is very important. But my two questions there, is it enough? You know that I should be talking about the national qualification framework. I was talking about slightly different system. It's kind of a framework, but it's on a validation qualification framework. So we should be talking about whether to start to establish national qualification framework with one methodology and creating learning outcomes with the qualifications should be the same for the formal education and for non-formal education. And now we have two different ways how to create learning outcomes, how we define those qualifications. So this is the things that we should be doing at the moment, and we should be talking about it. And that's it from my side. Thank you for your attention. And if you have questions, I know it's not that easy in a few minutes to say something about the system, to explain the system, and every system is completely different and it's not easy to understand. But, okay, Sylvia.
My name is Sylvia Walicka. I represent the Educational Research Institute from Warsaw in Poland, and I would like to ask you about this annual production plan, because it's the list of qualifications to be developed, and it's proposed by secular council, but it's like open call, or these qualifications are later developed by secular councils?
Usually it's an open call. It's an open call because this annual plan is done by the sector councils, and then it goes to our institute, National Institute of Education, and then we go to the ministry if they agree with this plan, and they can reject lots of qualifications if they are not if they don't want to have them in the system, and we have to cooperate with other ministries who are responsible for those qualifications. But it's not that in this production plan there are all the qualifications proposed by anyone. There are those who has to be approved by the sector council, which is quite important, and then by the National Institute of Education, and then by the ministry, responsible ministry, and then by the Ministry of Education. Is it okay? What I'd say? I don't have more microphones. If you buy a microphone, just please.
Jan, when you mentioned about qualifications in NSK, did I understand it correctly that to one qualification in the NSK there might be many more awarding bodies, or which do the assessment?
Just one awarding body, but we have
different assessors, many
persons, yeah. Authorizing persons.
And who is the awarding body? Is it the sectoral council or?
No, ministry, responsible ministry. It's always responsible ministry. So if it's this qualification, it's about education. We have the qualification which is called adult education teacher. So the body who's given the authorization is the Ministry of Education. And if it's the qualification which belongs to the industry, so it's the Ministry of Industry. Or if it goes to the Ministry of Labor, as Career Council, or for unemployed people, it goes to the Ministry of Labor.
So it must be always the ministry, or do you envisage any solutions that, let's say, private company?
No. It's in the act, it's in the legislation. It's always ministry or national bank, Czech National Bank. It's the only, but it's the state institution. Always.
Thank you for this.
Some more questions?
Viola, over there.
Hello, I'm Bettina Salvioni representing CNCP in France, so it is the National Committee for National Qualifications. I have just a question. The system NSK, it is managed by who actually? Who is in charge of this register?
Ministry of Education. And our institute, we are the agency who serves for the Ministry of Education. So we are the agency who are creating everything, even curricula for the qualifications. So our institute is the National Institute for Education, but everything has to be approved by the Ministry of Education. This is the one who is the
executive agency.
So and then you are linked with the other ministries when there are qualifications concerning them. So you make the coordination with the other ministries. Okay.
Every other ministry which is involved in this process, they have people appointed, in this area,
and they do the authorization for the ministries, and they cooperate with the Ministry of Education.
Okay.
And they're usually even part of those sector councils, so they are really like involved. So the communication is really, I think it's really good. And also there's one more thing. We have a Národní rada pro kvalifikace, National Board of Qualifications, which is like an advisory body for the Ministry of Education and for other ministries. And those ministries involved in this process are part of this board. So, and they have like 2 regular meetings like every year, and everything is like set up.